Thanks for tuning in to this edition of the RENSHAW Report. Murray reporting from the city, too tough to die. New London, we got a special show tonight. There's a big issue going on in Waterford called the data center. And my guests tonight are opposed to the project. They have some problems with what's going on out there, and it's good to keep informed because I don't understand it. On my left, Tina DuBosque. Tina and her family have been in the neighborhood of the scenic surroundings since they retired at Quaker Hill from North Stonington 8 years ago. Upon learning of issues surrounding the development of the data center on Dominion's Millstone property, she joined her neighbor Bryan and the concerned citizens of Waterford and is here tonight to give us her take on what's going on. To her left, Kathy Sheaffer became a resident of Waterford when she was 8 years old. Her dad worked at Millstone Power Plant in 1966, was involved in the construction of 1, 2, and 3. She's a longtime Waterford resident. She loves to clam fish, boating, swimming. She moved to Niantic for 37 years. Did you move back?
Yes.
Then you moved back to Waterford, where she's originally from and is at the Millstone Point Association, living in that beautiful spot.
Yes, I am.
Bryan Sayles and his family live in Quaker Hill. They've been there 14 years. He feels very fortunate to be among neighbors who are both friendly and considerate, enjoy the sights of the sounds of the variety of wildlife attracted to nearby Smith Cove, Hunts Brook. He's a nature guy, I guess. Mm-hmm. He likes reading the day paper, one of the few, and he started Concerned Citizens of Waterford, CCW, a grassroots group gathered for information and voice concerns about New England Edge LLC data center proposal. And I want to thank everybody for coming into the show tonight and try to inform the people out there what's going on, because I don't understand it. Now, I live in East Lyme, and this caught my attention when a newspaper reported that East Lyme had some people that were concerned with it. I own property in Waterford. I kind of like the idea of a project that's going to generate and be the second largest taxable property owner in, or property taxpayer in Waterford. So I kind of like the money aspect of it. As we pointed out earlier, you have some other concerns, one being the noise. Bryan, let's start with you because you're the founder and CEO of the Concerned Citizen Group,
Okay.
And then we'll move to the ladies.
Okay, sounds good. So I started Concerned Citizens of Waterford because of the lack of information coming out of our first selectman's office about the project. And it was really a grassroots movement. And as I spoke to some people and about the data center, most people didn't realize it was happening in our town. So we conducted our first meeting in the middle of August, and we had about 68 people show up. And we really just, at that point, talked a little bit about how we'd go about gathering information, because there was really no information out there. And so from that, we had dedicated people gathering some data and facts, and we've supported it with documentation and citing our resources. And what we've discovered is really concerning. So far as the tax issue, you mentioned it, that it's actually not a tax. The town isn't allowed under House Bill 6514 to tax that business data center like any other normal business. And it's a payment in lieu of taxes, or pilot, in the form of what's called a host fee agreement. And that's really not a great deal either, by the way. So just some background on that House Bill 6514 that was enacted in 2021. And it was, it's really legislation to try and incentivize developers to build data centers in Connecticut. And the stipulations in that House bill, or that bill, are that the developers come into a town and they actually propose a host fee. So it's kind of putting the cart before the horse. You go in there dangling some money in front of a town, saying this is how much we'll pay to develop a data center. And once you've signed that host fee agreement, then you start going through the process of trying to figure out whether or not that's it's good for the town in terms of the building itself.
So you're against it, Brian, is that correct?
I'm so against it. And I want to make that clear because I think maybe a month ago, 3 or 4 weeks ago, you had our first selectman on, and one of the first things he said was, and you had asked him, that you had thought that there might be some opposition to it, and he corrected you, and he said, well, no, it's probably more concerns. Well, I'm here to say no. We're way beyond concern.
Let's
We're in
move around the
opposition.
table.
Sure.
And let's hear from Kathy. Kathy, what are your thoughts? You live closest to the proposed project than anyone
I do,
in Millstone Point
extremely-
Association.
Extremely close, yes. I'm concerned about a few things. One of the things is the 24/7 noise that would be coming from a data center.
Okay, let's stop right there, because the first selectman, Rob Rule, I questioned him on the noise. I was concerned, and my thoughts are if it affects anybody, it shouldn't happen. What I read was that there's a humming noise. Now, Rob went to visit some of these places and assured me that there will be no noises that would affect any neighbor. Does that not set you at ease?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't seem like something that large, a hyperscale data center at 1.5 million square feet could be silent. There's going to be fans, many, many cooling fans. I'm not an engineer, but cooling fans on the top of these buildings that are going to be cooling these buildings 24/7 and making noise. As far as I know, there's no silent data centers. There will be noise.
Is that your biggest concern?
One of the biggest. The second one is the Northeast Edge has never built a data center. And this is not your average data center. This is 1.5 million square foot data center that they have no experience, no track record of successful jobs that were completed.
And Tina, you live in Quaker Hill, beautiful place.
Thank you.
As I admire every time I go by there. What are your concerns?
My concerns at first were the lack of transparency in the town government. I was very dismayed, I will say, about the fact that this just got signed and this agreement, host agreement, was signed without really talking to the general public. I gather that the Board of Selectmen and the RTM all voted for it. I don't know if everybody read the entire agreement, which we have all done. And I guess I'm shocked that the town was not approached publicly to let them know about this and how good or how bad it might be for the town.
So, on a local government level, what is the next move, and how does this? I think Rob tried to explain it to me, but from your perspective, where are we now, and what's the next step?
Well, that's a good question. When we had our first meeting, there were a lot of people in attendance, a lot of residents in attendance, and one of the PowerPoint slides that I had, I mentioned wanting to put together a Gantt chart, which is a project schedule more or less of steps, right? So everyone is saying, where are we with this? What state is this project at? And there were a couple of RTM people in attendance, and they actually, under a little bit of pressure, one kind of coughed up a Gantt chart, said New England Edge Gantt chart. And there it was. New England Edge had a series of steps that they needed to complete culminating in, you know, the building of the project. And one of the steps, I think the third step, said something about zoning amendment or zoning text changes, and that was pretty alarming. And that weekend, Lorette Saller, a resident, had emailed me something that said that actually referred to Dominion wanting to get a petition change so that they could carve out a spot for the data center, and that they actually submitted a petition to the Siting Council in Connecticut on July 28th.
The RTM did?
No, that was New England Edge. So, but
Oh.
the RTM, my point is that the RTM members, they had to know what was going on with that project. They had to know because they produced this sheet of 13 steps. Oh, it's a 13-step sheet, and it was labeled New England Edge LLC Gantt chart. And that weekend, we found out they had petitioned, and public comment was going to be closed within, I think, another week. And so everyone scrambled that Monday to contact the Siting Council to get them to ask them to extend the public comment period. And they did. So residents at least could have an opportunity to submit our concerns or our comment to the Siting Council about it. So again, that shouldn't have happened in my view. That's not transparency. That's kind of being selective about who knows about the project, and of course with this, again, this project being so impactful, I would have thought quite the opposite. So impactful to residents, particularly those living around the immediate area of Millstone Power. If you're going to site a 1.5 million square foot data center that draws 300 megawatts of electricity and have it plugged directly into reactors 2 and 3, which is their plan, you would think that everyone in the neighborhood would know about it, including East Lyme residents, because of course your East Lyme Bay or Niantic Bay and your tourism you're so heavily dependent on tourism that you would be in the know about what's going on there.
Kathy, are there any residents in your neighborhood that are for the project? Does anybody support it?
I have not heard of anyone that supported it, no. I can't quote anyone that there is someone that's in support of it, but I haven't heard anyone that there has been.
But what's your next move as a member of the Concerned Citizens?
I just follow Brian's lead, and we've divided into groups, and we've researched subjects. My homework was to research about jobs, about how many jobs, either the construction aspect or the running of a data center, how many jobs it would promote. And doing some research, they approximated about 120, I'm just going by quote, approximate.
No, that's it.
120 people for the data center to be run. And they said that would be 40 employees a shift. For 1.5 million square feet, one person would be responsible for 37,000 square foot of data center. So for such a large facility, it won't be employing many people. And these people at data centers need to be educated, most likely a bachelor's degree, training in data center operations, and not just be someone coming out of high school, out of Waterford High School, and be given a job at a data center. We're being told that Waterford residents are going to get multiple jobs from this data center. I personally don't feel that's going to be true, that they'll be hiring people from all over the country that are qualified in data centers. That's just my own feeling. As far as the construction aspect, I know the union members want this job, and they've come to all the meetings, and they've come as a very strong force, very boldly saying they want this job to go forward. They'll only be there temporarily. They'll do their job and they'll leave. They won't live next door to it or across Niantic Bay and listen to it. And I'm all for jobs. I understand.
I would think, though, that the RTM and the governing body of Waterford would support that feeling that it's important that the residents are comfortable with anything that goes in there. Am I incorrect?
Robert Brule had stated that the data center would be the best for every resident of the town of Waterford. I personally don't have those feelings.
Tina, you're you know the ins and outs of how government is supposed to work. I take it with your interest in the transparency.
Somewhat,
All right,
not
so-
exactly, but somewhat.
All
Thank
right,
you.
correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm not up to speed on any of this, so correct me if I'm wrong. The way I understand it, first selectman went into negotiations with First Edge or whatever it is, Fitting Edge?
New England
New England
Edge,
Edge.
yeah.
Has that contract been signed, and are there provisions in that contract that provide or ensure that the town regulations and all boards and agencies have to be satisfied? Or is this thing written in stone at this point?
It's a hosting agreement.
What does that mean?
That means that the town of Waterford has said, yes, we will host your project. And in return for that, you will pay us yearly, over 30 years, a certain amount of money in lieu of taxes. As far as satisfying every agency in town, I don't know. I don't know. Brian, do you?
Yeah, well, there's part of the problem is that there is in the host fee agreement, there's a description of the data center and their sort of plans to produce this data center, but when it comes down to the brass tacks of addressing concerns about issues such as its impact on the environment, inland wetlands, the noise issues, anything having to do with the interconnection with Millstone Power. The only thing that coming out of the town really is that, well, all those things are going to be determined once it gets to the Conservation Commission and the inland wetlands, and so really in one of our members in our group, Thad May, he's a retired civil engineer, and one of the points he made was, well, this is an awkward arrangement, because normally in towns, if you're going to develop or attract a big business and have a big project, you're asking for requests for proposals, requests for qualifications, rather. So in other words, you would solicit, right? So you would solicit businesses and say, well, look, we want to build, let's say, a data center. And so you would pick a number of companies and say, okay, what are your qualifications? Those would come back, and from that, you would weed out, right? And you would narrow down, you'd pick a handful of the most capable, what you would see as the most capable.
So do you think that there are that many people out there that would build the data center? I mean,
Well,
to me, it sounds a little strange. The developer came to the town, and why put yourself through all that exercise when do you think you could get a better developer that would spend more money? Or
well, I think this New England Edge or Northeast Edge or Mr. Quinn, his track record is he doesn't have a proven track record. He hasn't completed a actual project, actual data center. He's been he's involved in a lawsuit, rather large one. There's another organization soon. He's part of a $30 billion lawsuit. He was involved. He's only formed Any Edge for the past 18 months. It's only been in existence for 18 months. And I think one of our members, in fact, had done their research about we labeled that one integrity, the integrity of the capability of them, and found that he had spent some time prior to this in years past lobbying for the House Bill 6514. So, he hasn't built a data center. So we have a lot of questions, and it seems to me that if you're the first selectman of the town, that would be an immediate red flag. And again, we get back to one of your questions, that that where would you involve the townspeople? You haven't, not from the get-go.
Yeah.
And that's a huge concern, because we all come from a different perspective, and if you're not going to listen to the people in town, many of whom are very talented, then you shouldn't have started that. You shouldn't have signed a host fee agreement.
So Tina, when you go to these meetings, I mean, Rob is the head guy. He's the CEO of Waterford, right? But we have other members. They call it the RTM. What do they say? Are they all following this lead? It seems to me there's something strange going on here.
Well, apparently the RTM all agreed, when asked, that this host fee agreement was fine.
Did they know something that we don't? You don't know.
I don't know what they know.
I've been in communication.
Good.
So I was just going to let you know that Nick Gauthier is one on the RTM, and I had emailed him, and he promptly, responded to me, and I voiced what Bryan just said, that if this is such a great deal for a company to be able to plug in to Millstone, why shouldn't we be interviewing the best data center companies in the world to build us a data center? And what he clarified is, Northeast Edge did not contact the town of Waterford. Northeast Edge approached Dominion. They approached Dominion, not the town of Waterford. Dominion. So Waterford, he said, was not looking to build data centers there. They were not in the data center business, going out looking to get prices for people to build it. It was Dominion was approached by Northeast Edge because the convenience is that they could plug right into their electricity source.
So I would say, and again, I know nothing, but I would say that the first selectman is looking at this as a business opportunity for the town of Waterford to generate tax dollars, not as being the brain power behind a data center. Is that?
It's not generating tax dollars, though. They wish to pay an amount of money in lieu of taxes. They're saying that we will pay this amount of money every year to you.
But that's designed by the state of Connecticut, not by the first selectman or by a contract.
Yeah.
And I can tell you this.
Who decided on those fees? So
It's a percentage, I think. I'm not sure.
No.
I can tell you about what I know about pilots.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with New London, and there's a lot of pilots in New London. Hartford Current did a study on the pilot programs years ago, and it concluded that the pilot agreement returns less than 40% of the actual value that they should return. I'm not a pilot guy. I'm sorry. That whole system doesn't work for me. I want the money up front and pay taxes like everybody else. I think this is a foolish thing in the state of Connecticut, but here we are at this point. But go ahead.
So I did a comparison here. So I said, okay, so I took a 30-year host fee agreement versus traditional property taxes and created a spreadsheet. And through research, trying to find the costs of building a data center on this scale, is there's not a lot of precedent out there. Most of them that we've come across have been 100,000 square feet, roughly the size of Sears Roebuck, the old Sears Roebuck building. This data center's twice the size of the Crystal Mall, okay, just to give you an idea of the envelope. But what I did come across from this one company is that they're set up either by square foot, gross square foot. The cost is estimated by gross square foot or by megawatts of energy use. And I'll cut to the chase, if it goes anywhere from $600 a square foot to $1,100 a square foot. So really, the host fee agreement as a percentage of normal real property is about anywhere from 14% to 58%, depending upon how you cut it. So I think it's a bad deal. I don't think it was negotiated properly. And you're right, it's flawed legislation at the state level, because there are really no real guidelines other than, well, you can build it in a opportunity zone, or right. So a couple other stipulations with respect to how much of an investment a developer makes and the amount of time they'll have, a fee agreement they'll have to set up with the town. But there are no guidelines in terms of size of the project, the amount of electricity it uses, right?
Why should that
And
be a concern?
citing-
Why should that be a concern?
Oh, enormous concern, because first of all, the electricity at 300 megawatts is an enormous amount of nuclear energy. So if you take 300 megawatts off of the grid, if you are producing that to send that out into the grid, for that to become part of the mix of base, and that's base load, important base load, to be part of the mix of other power generation sources to be sold through distributors, distribution. If you take that amount of energy, that's about 14% of the nameplate, I think it's called, power generation of those two reactors, 2 and 3. So if someone in Dominion came to the CEO and said, we're just gonna, you know what, I think we're just gonna lose 14% and not supply it out there to ISO New England, and not have a good reason, I think the leadership would flip out. I came across a document that they were touting their expertise in being able to increase the efficiency of their plants by 1.6%. And they ran that by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and they got that approved to be able to run it a particular way. And that represents 20 megawatts of energy. So if you were to say, okay, rather than sending that 300 megawatts out to your home, to all our homes, in all the hospitals, skilled nursing facilities, all these places that depend upon it, then I have a huge problem.
Is that part of
with
the siting commission's duties and responsibilities to analyze that data?
We hope so. We hope so. I think the Siting Council has oversight over Millstone Power and Dominion. That whole site, it's 526 acres, and
So they could possibly put the NICs, either approve it or deny it right at
Correct.
that level. Is that correct?
I believe so. Because they have a say in what happens to that land. And one of the points that I've made is, and I'm concerned about energy security, is that 526 acres in docket number 4, which was a docket when they licensed reactor 3, is described so well as, because of its geography, its location, the water, to the water temperature of the sound. All these analysts and engineers went through all these testing and everything else, and they arrived at Millstone being that 526 acres being ideal for it. So we have hopefully millions of generations to come that are going to need that site for power production, especially as we decarbonize.
My, not to get off this subject, but I was told that there were 7 units approved to go out at Millstone Point. Is that a correct?
Power production wise?
7 units.
Of nuclear reactors?
Yeah, Millstone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
Yeah,
6.
I mean, it's
Are you aware of that?
I haven't come across
I haven't
that.
heard that.
I know. Well, go ahead.
Let me say, when my father started there in the 60s,
Yeah.
the plan then was to have 5.
Ah,
Now,
So it's
the plan was to have 5 at that time. Now, Unit 1 got shut down,
Yeah.
we know. But what changed it stopped it at 3 and not to 5? I don't know.
You all know that I hate Eversource.
Yeah.
We discussed that before. Is this a NIMBY thing, or is this a different scenario? Because I'm for nuclear powerhouses. I like to see one out there tomorrow morning. We need electricity and we need power. Would you guys be against that as well, or?
I am for, there is a new type of nuclear power plant that's been developed. They're smaller, and that's
Yes,
probably where
that's-
this comes from, that there
was
would be a
gonna-
total of 7, and there could be.
What I've heard is that that property was designed for power production,
Yeah.
not bringing something on that's going to consume massive amounts of megawatts. So that land was to make production. So there's a smaller module. I think it's, I don't know, MDR or something, and I'm sorry, I don't know the initials, but
Yeah, well,
there's modular reactors.
Yeah.
So that land, instead of data centers, could be building smaller modular reactors to promote electricity more for the grid.
That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
Could we all get on board with something like that, do you think? And is there anything, I'm changing subjects here.
That's
You know
okay.
how I confused myself? Tina?
You do not.
First of all, would anything make you happy with regard to building this data center? Is it possible that,
Me?
yeah,
No, and I'm all about the energy security because I wrote a letter to the editor of the day, I think it was in March, and one of my last sentences was, I hope everyone in Connecticut is paying attention because of the importance of that nuclear power to the rest of the residents of Connecticut and the region. The data center itself, again, the legislation is flawed. The amount of money we would get for Waterford is a pittance compared to what it should be. The second thing is that what about the community in Niantic who has to put up with the same potential health problems associated with.
what could they be?
Well, we discussed in our groups the environmental impact. You're talking about taking a 1.5 million square foot footprint, or roughly it's 2 stories high, so it's 500 is like 750,000 square feet, and you would have to, assuming it's a relatively flat roof building, you have a lot of runoff into the sound.
Well,
you'd
that's
have-
gonna have to be calculated and figured out before a building permit would be. I
Well,
mean, the sound is of great importance, and nobody's gonna fly by that.
We
Right.
would
Well, the
hope
sound
not.
is a huge problem. But I want to make clear that that's not the only issue we have with it. And I would think that while Waterford's getting this money, and they can spend it as they will for whatever is going on in town, what about the people in Niantic who are going to feel the effects and won't see a nickel of this money? So, and you're heavily dependent on tourism, so yeah, I think it's a problem.
Yeah, we're also concerned in our neighborhood about blasting. We
Yes.
have not been told how much blasting there's going to be going on. We live very close to the construction site. Could the blasting cause damage to our homes? No one's told us. We need a public meeting to hear plans on that to make sure there wouldn't be any damage to any of our homes.
Rob assured me, I think anyway, as I remember, that there were gonna be public meetings when it was time for the public hearings.
We don't know when it's time for the public hearings. We were hoping there would be one already so that we could voice our concerns and have them answered.
Yeah, in the RTM meetings, it's very controlled. You have a public comment. There's no discourse. There's no back and forth. There's none of that. You can get something off your chest, and
Who's your local RTM representative?
there are 4 in our neighborhood.
Why wouldn't you call them?
Well, I
And-
haven't
and
called
ask
them
them.
yet because I think that we've spent a lot of time focusing on trying to get to the bottom of this and doing our own independent research on it. And because I don't think they were so well informed either. So this is part of the issue that we have. And having the town involved from before you decided to sign a host fee agreement probably would have been the way to do it. And so therefore, you can take collectively all the people's input and weigh that as in part of the decision making before you sign on the dotted line. I think you mentioned was a Wallingford.
Wallingford did
a
that,
town
yes,
meeting
yeah.
before they signed the final.
Absolutely.
Now you sign a host fee agreement. Now you're kind of, you're facing lawsuits, those sorts of things.
Go over that,
Possibly.
Tina. Did you describe what happened in Wallingford? Did I miss that?
No.
What he was, could you,
Oh, yes,
no,
we-
just set it up because a data center was proposed in Wallingford.
in Wallingford,
Okay.
and a town meeting was held to discuss it. And then a vote was taken, and they voted it down.
So that was the initial meeting.
Yeah. Before they signed a host agreement. Host fee agreement.
Now,
or
what
whatever.
about the other towns that have also, there's been other towns in Connecticut.
There have been, and I haven't looked into those
That
ones
Northeast
yet.
Edge has
Yeah.
tried to promote data
Yeah.
centers in their towns.
Mhm.
right-
Yeah, they're
right,
all over the
Brian?
place.
Yeah.
Yeah, Groton, was it Groton and Basra?
So
Basra, yes.
we'd agree that the next move is from the siting council's decision.
Yeah, we're waiting to see what they're
When
going to
does
rule.
that due?
It's due on January 24th.
Who's on the siting council?
People up in Hartford. Oh, they were actually located in New Britain, but it's a state government agency, and so they could render a decision anytime. We had asked them for a public hearing, and they declined to have a public hearing. And afterwards, we discussed it, and we thought, well, maybe they have enough public comment to work with from us because we gave them a handful, I think, and
Well, I
hopefully
thought
it gave them.
I thought they
food
had
for
a public
thought.
hearing, but nobody was allowed to talk. There was no
No.
No.
public.
No, no, no.
No.
There was no
No.
public
So
hearing.
this is all done in a boardroom with.
RTM members. There was a meeting that some of us went to.
Well, there was also that meeting in the Goshen Firehouse.
And that was for our
and-
MPA. Our president of our association contacted Mr. Brule that said, contacted him and wanted to discuss the matter.
As a neighborhood
As a
associate,
neighborhood,
okay?
yeah, as an association. So he met us at Goshen Firehouse. He promised that we'd have independent sound specialists to do evaluations of what sounds presently come from the plant currently. That we'd have independent companies doing that, not anyone, he said, in someone's pocket, a Northeast Edge pocket, anyone's pocket. Now it's been announced that Northeast Edge is going to be hiring the company
Yes.
to do the sound studies. But then there will be somebody else to overlook them.
How many people were at that meeting?
That's not independent.
No,
Kathy, how many people were at that meeting?
and I'd say at least 60. I'm
Ah.
guessing. There were,
Okay. Yeah.
I think there's 100 homes in my neighborhood, I believe 100. Some people are summer residents, so it wasn't summer. So people could live in other states and not be able to be there.
Was this discussion after the host fee agreement
Yes,
was?
yes.
Yeah, so
And none of us knew about the host, we were all in the dark.
yeah, the process wasn't transparent. So getting back to the Gantt chart, in February, Mr. Brule had a special meeting, and there was a letter in the day from a Mr. Alfera in town, who was bewildered because he went to this meeting expecting there to be a little bit of information on this data center proposal, but he was surprised that they actually went to vote on it and look at accepting the host fee agreement, and all the union members were there. So where were lots of townspeople? There were a few townspeople there, and but how is it that all these union members, union officials, knew about it, and the general public in Waterford was in the dark? So during that meeting, town attorney Nick Keppel, he made that statement, well, it's just it's a starter, and but it's up to the town of, the residents of Waterford and whether or not they want this data center. 3 weeks later, Rob Brule signed the host fee agreement. So while Nick posed that question, there was no organization, there was no publicity, there was nothing to actually conduct a townwide meeting or something significant to let people know that this is what Mr. Brule was pursuing. And so he signed the host fee agreement, and the rest is history. There was a petition being circulated online, got 1,200 signatures, and there was nothing coming out of the town hall. So again, up to August is when I decided to start organizing some people, some townspeople, try and get some facts. And it's been like pulling teeth.
Mm-hmm.
And back to Thad May's point, this is, again, this legislation is, and I'm not trying to beat up on the governor, he's done a pretty good job in many areas, but in this one, I think he's whiffed. It really puts the developer, in this case, New England Edge, if you want to, he hasn't had any experience completing any data centers. His business has been formed for roughly 18 months, and he's involved in a $30 billion lawsuit.
So he's not a data center guy himself, he's just a developer.
Correct.
Seems to
correct.
be,
He
yes.
is.
So that's what's wrong with part of what's wrong with the legislation is that it kind of thrown us to the wolves. And you have to, in the legislation itself, you have to have a host fee agreement signed before you can do anything else. And so I actually have a copy of that House bill.
What else would you do? I'm not understanding this host, what's the terminology?
host fee agreement.
Hosting agreement. What does it actually,
Well, it sets up a payment plan to the town, and as the project commences, you get a payment, and then over the course of whatever.
that's the nuts and bolts of the host agreement? It sets up the
Yeah.
pilot?
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's the
Yes.
host.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
the nuts and bolts of it.
The
Yeah.
green,
Yes.
the almighty dollar.
Yeah.
And it's not even. And again, it's a if you look at the numbers, it's a pittance. $231 million on a building that's going to probably be in excess of $1 billion or $2 billion or whatever it's going to be, plus the updating and upgrading of the. It's probably going to host. There may be some AI computers in there, very high-end, very energy-consuming
Very
computers,
energy consuming.
energy intensive. And back to the point about the environment, is that with a nuclear power plant, they're bound by law to monitor all the environment around them.
Who
and,
is?
Millstone. So they actually have scientists that will monitor things like algae growth, the mollusks in the bay, the fish, everything, and they conduct studies on them. So the thing that concerns me is if you take something so dissimilar in a data center with whatever it's going to produce in terms of its impact on the environment and have that be on that property next to 2 nuclear reactors, what happens if something goes sour with the environment and we're not quite sure, is it the data center or is it the nuclear reactors or what is it? So again, I get back to there's 526 acres there. The Siting Council has been overseeing this for 50-something years. It's been dedicated to nuclear power production, clean nuclear power production, that the people depend upon. And it's got a particular standard industrial classification for it. Now you're taking a retail customer out of convenience and out of, really it's going to be a moneymaker for Dominion.
Absolutely.
Agreed.
But
Yes.
it really is taking that and sticking it there. Now, if I'm a business in Connecticut and I find out that company is paying a lower rate than I do, and my published rates, whatever they are, EverSource, then I'm going to be a little irritated. And then, and that's going to go on indefinitely, or at least for 30 years, 20, 30 years, the host fee agreements for 30 years. And this is not something that just is stable. Like Kathy mentioned, there's a boom in defense spending in Southeastern Connecticut, where you have 54, 56 manufacturers supporting, just in Eastern Connecticut, supporting Electric Boat. And Electric Boat is going through massive expansion. That means you're going to have to house these people. So all this demand is being created, and where you're not going to be able to add capacity.
Mm.
So while Mr. McCoy from New England Edge touts in there, it says it's going to be clean. It's going to be clean. It's going to be a clean energy we're going to use.
He's the attorney for Northeast Edge.
Yeah, I'm sorry. He's the attorney for Northeast Edge. The problem is that the only way you're going to backfill that is through more fossil fuel burning. So while they're gobbling up clean nuclear energy, base energy, that's the component of our costs out there,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to have to fire up during extreme weather events in the winter and in the summer. You're going to have to fire up other energy producers. And it's typically fossil fuel. So actually, we're going to be polluting our environment more with the data center. And that's how that works.
There's another issue too. Millstone 2 and 3 occasionally go down for maintenance, right? So then what happens to the data center? Where do they get their electricity? Well, Millstone has to provide electricity to its offices while the 2 reactors are down. And they have to buy it from where, Rhode Island, or I'm not sure how that all works. But so they're going to not only be supplying their offices, their plant there for, while the reactors are down, but they're also going to have to be supplying the data center, because if that ever goes down, that's a big problem. That's part of the cloud that we know, and if there are AI components there, is going to be a real problem. I don't know. I don't know the answers to any of this.
I don't know, from where I stand, that's not an issue that would concern me. My concern is how it's going to impact the townspeople of Waterford. And now that East Lyme's involved with it, and is it going to be good for everybody in that way? The issue that you just talked about, that's an administrative thing. That's what Eversource does. They provide power to their customers.
Yes, but I think the price is going to go way up. I mean,
That gets back to my objection. You got me there.
Yeah, the price would go up. And in fact, if you took the capacity of both reactors 2 and 3, and you had as was the case this year, both were down for a 5-week period. That 300 megawatts has to come off of ISO New England's grid, which means that will put a strain on supply and cost.
I'm going to call my friend John Leahy, who was a big shot in the power company, and his job was in the distribution end of it, and ask him. I wish I had called him previously, but he'd be a great source of information with regard to that, and I'll call him tomorrow.
Wonderful.
And,
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. That
and
would
let
be
him
helpful.
know.
And he can also get in touch with concerned citizens of Waterford and allay our fears if there is actually something, some solution to that. But
Well, this might end up being a good thing, though. Let's not keep a closed mind here. Maybe these issues can be worked out. Is it's not possible with you, Brian, but maybe we can work them out.
but I know the reality is that there's only enough energy being produced, and there's only one site in the state of Connecticut.
Is that in remarks to the sitting council?
That actually is actually a fact based on Ned Lamont. There was a bill, and they lifted the moratorium on nuclear power plant building in Connecticut, and so that is only for existing nuclear power plant sites. So Millstone's the only existing running power plant site in Connecticut. It's the only place you can build nuclear power plants. And again, my argument isn't against, and none of us are against. We're very blessed to have responsible Dominion employees running that plant and running it safely and providing us with energy for these last 50 years. And I feel very comfortable with that. My concern is with you get into the upper management, the leadership in Dominion, and that's where I have a problem because I think they're the ones that are making some of these decisions, and to the detriment of us all. That's how I feel about it, and I don't. It would they're in writing their own officials in Dominion saying that they're not considering SMRs right now. It's years away. The technology is years away. It's in here. And that even at that point, if you started to try and get that passed through and built, we're years and years away. So until then, what are we going to do? Feed this data center and then one up in Killingly? There's one up in Killingly going in up there. They've signed a host fee. I think they've signed a host fee agreement up there. So all of a sudden, how are you going to create generation? You're just not. It's going to be
We are
tough.
running out of time, unfortunately.
Okay.
Kathy, will you
Yes.
sum up with anything else you would like to say?
I'm a little bit along with Brian with energy and the grid. The governor wants us to all have electric cars in 10 years. If everyone is, that's going to be another draw that we need for the residents. So I feel, again, the residents need to be guaranteed that we'll have enough infrastructure to take care of our needs.
And Tina?
I agree with you, both of you, and I just would like to see better notification to the general public by the government that we've elected for this town.
And Brian, would you tell maybe out there listening how they would get in touch with you guys or how to keep informed with regard to this issue?
Sure, thank you. You can, residents of Waterford can email concernedcitizens.waterford@gmail.com. So concernedcitizens.waterford@gmail.com. I think we're seeing some activity over in Niantic, so hopefully that's going to start taking off too.
I want to thank everybody for coming on.
Thank
Murray.
you.
Thank you, Murray.
Thank you,
Joe.
Murray.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
I applaud what you're doing.
Thank
Keep
you, Murray.
involved. And
Thank you, Murray.
I'd advise everybody to pay attention, get involved in your community.
Absolutely.
And we all got to get along. Let's work this thing out one way or the other and move on. Maria, signing off. Miss City, Too Tough to Die, New London.